Welcome back to this week's edition of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. This week we have famed music critic and editorial director of the Coda Collection, which is a streaming music, video, film collection. It's available wherever you download. It's actually a mobile app, is out today. If you have Amazon Prime, you can get it for $4.99 a month right now with a free 7-day trial. Welcome, Greg Kot. How are you today?
Good, Brett. Good to be here.
Glad to have you. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the Coda Collection. I mean, for 40 years, pretty much on the nose, you were at the Chicago Tribune. 30 of those were as the music critic. As people might know, the Chicago Tribune has bought out a lot of people to basically purge staff over the last several years, and you were one of those people. Did you know where you were headed after leaving the Tribune?
I was looking not to do anything beyond what I was already doing. I'd run two companies, Sound Opinions, the radio show, and then I have a basketball program, travel basketball program. It's been around for 20 years, called Over the Edge, and we coach about 500 kids a year in Chicago area. So I was plenty busy. I wasn't looking for anything new. Coda Collection approached me about a few weeks after I took the buyout from the Trib, and presented this idea for this multimedia music platform that they were starting, and they wanted me to be in charge of the website, the writing and the editing. Everything they told me, I was not eager to start something new at that point. That would be the third startup that I would be involved in. But I was happy to do it. Everything they said sounded fantastic to me. Like, this is exactly the kind of job I would design for myself if I had to. And I'm happy to be part of it. As I said, we were one of the first hires there as a manager of the company, and I'm happy to have built it. And we're making some good progress in terms of the kind of movies we're able to stream. And I've got some world-class writers who are working for the website. So it's kind of I don't think there's anything quite like it anywhere. The context we're able to provide our streaming content is pretty. It's second to none in the music world, and I think that's the void that we're filling. So for me, it was an opportunity to do something that hadn't been done before, and to do it well, and to be able to hire people that I really love to write, and to do some long form writing myself. So all of that has more than justified my idea of thinking this might be a good thing to try, a couple of years ago.
That's awesome. Yeah, and then you've been doing Sound Opinions with Jim DeRogatis, who used to be with the Chicago Sun-Times and Rolling Stone and some other places, since 1998. And you guys have since moved from XRT to WBEZ to now being an independently offered show. How does it still work with you and Jim? How you guys obviously still get along, and the show is clicking still. Tell me a little bit about the progression from when it started to where it is now.
I think we didn't really know what we were doing. I mean, we're two music writers, longtime critics who are, took a flyer and said, let's do a radio show together, modeled after a couple of our heroes, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. Jim obviously worked at Sun-Times with Ebert, me at the Trib with Siskel. We love the fact that two movie critics could pull off a show talking about movies, something that they both love and that a lot of people love for half an hour. And we thought we could do the same thing about music, because every time we're out and about, we're talking about music with somebody, getting into some argument about stuff that we love, stuff that we don't love. Let's do a radio show built around that concept. And lo and behold, here we are. Still don't really know what we're doing, and we're still doing it. So it's been a journey, to say the least. Starting out on a commercial radio station in January of '99, and then being being wooed away by public radio in 2005, and then going independent 2 years ago. I wish we'd done it sooner. Actually, I think we're thriving more than ever. We taped the show in Jim's living room with really nice microphones, and got a small team of really great producers. Andrew Gill, who's been with us for a very long time, Alex Claiborne, Sol Delgadillo, who we hired as an intern a few years ago, now an assistant producer. My daughter Katie is doing our social media. So it's what can I say? I'm working with a bunch of people I really enjoy working with, and we're able to do a show that we love to do. And like I said, it's not because of our incredible professionalism. It's more about, I think, our enthusiasm for the subject and the fact that we just enjoy talking about it. And fortunately, some other people do too. So that's kept us afloat.
Yeah, I mean, the show, you guys still get really, still do a lot of excellent shows, and the guests you've had over the years have just been sometimes just mind blowing. I mean, some of the people you get, and then for performances and the like. One question I think about a lot is, as you're just a little bit older than I am, I believe. How do you stay current with new music?
To me, it's a matter of curiosity. If you have to try to keep up, and it's a chore, then you're not going to. If you're not interested in it, I guess being a journalist, you're naturally curious about a lot of things about the world around you. And one of the things that I always excited about my job, made me excited about my job, was that I would get up in the morning knowing that I was going to learn something new today. I was going to be, blown away by something that I had not been expected to know existed until that day. Because music is always changing, always evolving. There's always something great coming down the road. I never get stuck in the past in terms of, I've got records that I love that were made 50 years ago, but I've also got records that I love that are made this week. And people say, what's the greatest record you've ever heard? And I say, well, I'm hoping it's the one I hear next week. And I have not lost that excitement of hearing something new and something great. And the other thing is that as I've listened to more music, my desire to listen to more music has actually grown. I want to expand. I feel like I'm constantly expanding the types of music that I listen to. You're younger and you're listening to a certain type of music that you really love, and you listen to that style of music over and over again.
Yeah.
But I just found that my parameters have widened so much over the years, and there's just so much great stuff out there. There's stuff from the past, there's stuff from more current stuff that I'm constantly discovering. To me, music is one of the great human endeavors. I mean, it's one of the reasons we're on this planet, to create, make stuff. And music is like a really highly developed form of human communication. I always say that pop music is the most immediate art form. It's how we talk to each other. It's how, in terms of art, it takes a movie, 2 years to come out after the events that inspired it happened. With music, you can literally get a song that day about something that you saw on the news that in the morning.
Yeah.
It's that immediate. And I think if you look at even just something as superficial as the pop charts every year, you get a window into what people were thinking and what the world liked, and you get a sort of a window into our souls as a race, as a species, and there's so much of it. What a document of human experience. I mean, I think music is just endlessly creative, endlessly interesting. And if you're curious about the world at all, what's not to love about that? So, I don't think I'll ever lose that passion for that. That's what keeps me going. And believe me, it's not a chore to keep up. It's something like I enjoy. I love doing it.
That's great. I mean, I know it's definitely a harder thing for most people as they get older to keep up. And I gotta be honest, I don't know a lot about a lot of the, you know, artists out nowadays. It's also harder to kind of, there's no, I guess, specific tastemaker anymore, because it used to be funneled into radio or into high-end you know, the big magazines, and so you would hear about stuff in one way, but now it's spread out so far that people almost feel, I think, to a certain extent, overwhelmed by the amount, and that there's no, generally, unless you're listening to something like a playlist or something with, you know, a Spotify or Pandora, where it's an algorithm where something new might cross your path, you know, it's unless it's being, you know, sent to you, you know, somehow, I think people feel like they're a little bit lost in terms of what's new out there. But I know for myself, I enjoy hearing something new that I actually do like. It just, sometimes it feels like I'm cutting through a forest with a weak a weak blade trying to find it.
Well, you know, it's funny what you say, because people used to say that to me when they would go into a record store, like they'd go into Tower Records back when Tower Records was around, or Amoeba or
Yeah.
something like that, in, you know, these big stores. They say, I walk in there, I just don't, you know, I'm just overwhelmed. I don't know, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And I said, well, to me, it's like moving, you know, like you have all these boxes in your house, and you go, where do I start?
Yeah.
Well, you just start, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
one day at a time. You got your whole life to discover stuff. And to me, it's like, you know, just wander over to a section and just start. I used to buy stuff just based on album covers, you know, like I'd
Yeah.
look at the album cover and go, that looks kind of cool. And back then it wasn't, you know, I mean, you could get stuff for a few bucks. It wasn't like you were spending, breaking the bank to buy a new record. I used to do that once a week, just buy a new record and try it out and see what was on it. And then of course I read reviews to you know, uh, to get a sense of what was going on. I still feel we can do that with Sound Opinions, is that we can present some stuff that we really love,
Mm.
and there's a ton of stuff adjacent to that that people can find out about. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of ways to discover music. To me, it's more about
Oh,
enjoy it.
yeah.
You know, enjoy it, and I think for a lot of people, it's time. You know, they feel like it's time consuming, which it is. Fortunately, I've been able to make a living out of spending my time finding great music, and then
Yeah.
hopefully recommending some of it to other people that have similar tastes. So it's there are obviously ways to you know, kind of narrow down the chase, so to speak,
Yeah.
so that you can find stuff that you love.
Well, I like I said, I do love discovering new things. I love when something catches me. What I love about the modern era is that I can go back. I have a music playlist for driving that spans 100 years. So I'm talking, you know, 1920s on, and there are songs from the 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, you know, that I'm just discovering and hit me as much as anything that I grew up on or I hear now, or, you know, what have you. Um, you know, so I think that's one of the beauties of modern day, is that you could literally find anything.
Yeah,
You know, whereas before, if you heard the song on the radio once and you couldn't find it in your record store, you were kind of SOL. You know, you're just,
sure.
you know,
Yeah,
some
no doubt
songs
about that.
I hadn't heard for like 40 years, and I discovered on Spotify. So it's like, you know, and in one way that's great. I wish they paid musicians more, but you know, that's a different topic. Well, you know, speaking of, about new music, uh, the music festival season is gearing up. And in Chicago, we have Lollapalooza and Pitchfork, which are two big ones. Lollapalooza is obviously a mammoth thing at this point. Pitchfork seems a little bit more, I guess, relatable to maybe to most people, because it has a more focus on independent style music, with maybe some mainstream crossover. Lollapalooza has really morphed over the years to be a it's straight. It's, in my opinion, straight away from the initial, you know, tour in 1991 with Nine Inch Nails and Jane's Addiction and Ice-T and, you know, what have you. What do you make about of the change with Lollapalooza over the years?
You know, it's been It's been different for quite a number of years. People are still, it's almost like people are shocked that it's not what it was in 1991.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it's like it's been more than 30 years, folks. Let's move on. It's not going to be that anymore.
yeah,
They're looking, the people who are buying tickets to these outdoor weekend festivals are young people.
yeah.
If you're in your 40s and 50s and you have 3 kids and you got a mortgage, you're not looking to spend 4 days out in Grant Park. You can't afford, you don't have the time to do that. You don't have the
Right.
spirit to do that, you know.
Yeah,
Uh, and I get it. So they're looking at an audience that's in their late teens to mid 20s, and that's the primary ticket buying audience for a big festival like that. They're going to cater to that audience with the kind of music that they are consuming on their cell phones.
yeah,
It's as simple as that. I mean, obviously, Metallica is a band that sort of transcends eras and generations.
yeah,
So that they're a headliner, they're a name, and they might draw some of the older folks into that venue. They're easily the veteran group up there. Green Day is a close second.
right.
But then you're looking at artists like Doja Cat and Lil Baby, even a bluegrass artist like Billy Strings. If you're a country music fan, Billy Strings is kind of a newcomer.
Yeah,
And he's actually very good, by the way. I'm not denigrating him in any way, but I mean these are an artist like Lil Baby is gigantic for somebody who's 23,
yeah.
and somebody who's 53 has never heard of him. And fine. That's the way it
Yeah,
should be. That's who the festival's for. So people who are complaining that Lollapalooza wasn't what it was in the alternative era are kind of missing the point. It's not about
yeah,
that anymore. It's about a different era of listeners, a different way of consuming music, and who the superstars are today are quite a bit different than they were in 1991.
yeah,
As for Pitchfork, I think I've always loved their bookings. I think in general, it's a terrific festival good to go to, more manageable from a standpoint of just being able to get around and see stuff.
yeah,
I think they did a nice job of laying out Union Park. They've got that down to a science. All credit to Mike Reed, great drummer in Chicago, who's also a fantastic talent buyer, who's kind of helped helm that for years and years now. I believe he's still involved. But anyway, I mean, you look at the array of artists. It's pretty
yeah,
much spans. If you're looking for alternative, if you're looking for what Lollapalooza was in the 90s, this is your best bet. So a
yeah,
festival like this.
yeah. And then for those just looking for kind of like a throwback, another good one is Riot Fest, which does have a reliance on perhaps older acts, and they do a lot of specialty things like have out bands play their one entire album and things like that. I mean, we're definitely blessed with festivals in this city, that's for sure.
Well, the reason they do them is people want them.
Yeah,
People in Chicago, I've heard it over and over again. They want to be outdoors in the summer. And
yeah,
street festivals have been part of the culture in Chicago even long before Lollapalooza got here. So it's a tradition. Obviously the impact on the clubs is the thing that I always look at as being the negative side of that
yeah,
equation. And they still haven't truly solved that issue. The clubs have been beaten up pretty badly the last 2 years with COVID and having to
yeah,
many of them having to shut down. Now they're reopening only to be greeted by an outpouring of festivals. But the argument I've heard otherwise is that a lot of the agents say that once their act plays a festival of the size of a Lollapalooza or even a Pitchfork, they start to build an audience in that city. A lot of people have an opportunity to see that small band playing that stage at 2 in the afternoon, and so that when they do come back and play, an Empty Bottle, later in the year, there's an audience there for that show, based on a lot of people, word of mouth, whatever, seeing an act at a festival over the summer. I'm not 100% convinced that argument is enough to satisfy a club owner and say, oh yeah, it's a good deal for us. Um, but it's unfortunate. Nonetheless, the club scene in Chicago continues to thrive. I think the thing that I think is most amazing about Chicago, and people from around the country who are in the music industry tell me this, that Chicago is a great concert town. People go out and see shows. It's the middle of winter. It's, 10 degrees outside, but people are still going out to see music. And I
Yeah.
think we're going to see a huge built up of a repressed
Yeah.
concert going desire in the audiences in the next 12 months. It's going to be, if COVID finally goes away to an extent that allows us to do shows comfortably indoors and out, I think you're going to see a big spike in audience response, and I think a lot of clubs are going to be revived, and it'll be a good thing for music in general in Chicago.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I'm really hoping that we're going to be turning that corner, or we have turned that corner. There's still worry about what is on the horizon and if we have to go back to anything. But for right now, it seems like we're doing okay, which I hope continues.
Right.
Well, the other thing I wanted to talk about, I mentioned to you in my email, is two prominent music deaths recently, and the first one was, both were a shock to me, but Mark Lanegan, formerly of the Screaming Trees, he's worked with Queens of the Stone Age, he's worked with Isabel Campbell, Greg Dooley, all sorts of people. He's had a thriving solo career, and he died at 57 fairly recently, which surprised many people. You had interactions with him in the past, correct?
Yeah, I got to know Mark a little bit. I was a huge fan of Screaming Trees. I was buying their records when they were on SST in the 80s before anybody knew about them. They were, from Ellensburg, Washington, which was nowhere back then. I mean, it was outside Seattle. It really wasn't part of the Seattle scene. That band was not, considered a grunge band, even though they got lumped into that category once Nirvana and Soundgarden broke. But they were definitely a force to be reckoned with. I remember the first time seeing them, I just go, these are some of the largest men I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
And Lanigan's a towering presence, but the Connor brothers, there's gigantic dudes, on guitar and bass, and then Barrett Martin on drums. I'm going, wow,
Yeah.
imposing physically with a sound to match. And Lanigan's voice was one of a kind. That was the thing that was most arresting to me about the band. The band was sort of a psychedelic rock band.
Yeah.
These big swirling sheets of sound from the three instrumentalists, and then Lanegan sort of cutting through all that with this baritone vocal style, just kind of, implacable, just kind of not fighting to be heard, but just being heard nonetheless. He had incredible gravitas in both his physical presence and the sound of that voice. It was a one of a kind voice. There are very few singers who sounded like Mark. And in addition to that was his incredible taste in music. I mean, he was a true connoisseur of old folk and blues stuff. Kind of had almost a biblical sense of, the mayhem that was like in the Old Testament. It's like, a lot of that came through in the sound of his voice and also the kinds of things he was singing about in the songs he chose. For example, his version of In the Pines, or, Where Did You Sleep Last Night, the old Lead Belly song. I heard that song for the first time when he performed it on his first solo album in 1990.
Yeah.
And a guy named Kurt Cobain, who nobody really knew about, was playing guitar and singing backing vocals on that. Cobain was a
Right.
huge fan. And that's where Cobain found out about the song. And he, in turn, performed it at that Nirvana Unplugged show in late 93, just a few months before he died. And that's just, to me, Cobain's finest moment. But it started with him knowing Mark Lanegan and Lanegan appreciating the song and singing it in 1994, 3 years before that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Cobain considered Lanegan almost like a brother. I know the weird thing was, excuse me, with Lanegan's death, I had just interviewed Barrett Martin scant weeks before, and he was telling me how great everybody was doing. And honestly, we hardly talked about music. We mostly talked about his his Buddhism beliefs,
Oh, yeah.
which I found far more interesting to talk about than to rehash the same thing that, about, the past. But yeah, I got to see the Screaming Trees perform on one of the most interesting tours ever. It was a Oasis tour where Liam failed to show up, so Noel just took over, and they opened. And they were one of those opening bands that pretty much rivaled the headliners on
Hmm.
stuff. That doesn't happen all that often. Most of the time you're like, I might like the opener, but they're never gonna be better than who I really came to see. And in
Right.
that case, that was a rare example. And his solo work over the years, I've just gotten more and more into. And yeah, I know he had a bad bout with COVID, and he was even in a coma, I guess, at one point from it. So I don't know if that had. I haven't heard anything new about if that had something to do with his untimely death. But he was also a heavy drinker. He was a drug addict in the past. A lot of times when you put your body through something like that for many years, it doesn't help later in life.
Yeah, that's for sure. He put his body through the ringer. Yeah, and he did have some near-death experiences. I mean, his autobiographies, which are both, I think there's two of them,
Mhm.
are excellent. The stuff in there about his childhood and his
Yeah.
issues with drug addiction. I mean, a lot of that stuff does catch up with you. I'm sure he just wore his body out, but obviously you don't want to see anybody die that young. 57. He's still very vital as an artist.
Yeah.
And it was a shock. I have to say, I took this one hard. I mean, there's been a lot of people dying in the last few years for sure.
Oh yeah.
That we loved as artists, but Lanegan was just that was a tough one. I don't know if it was because I knew him a little bit or I loved the band so much, but it just didn't seem like his time had come, and here he was gone.
Yeah. No, that hit me tougher than I think I even ever could have imagined. And obviously, the next one that just happened was the death of Taylor Hawkins, drummer in Foo Fighters. Who, I mean, if you looked at him, he was this wiry guy that just pounded the hell out of the drums. After you knew that he had his trouble in the past with drugs, but we don't know for sure exactly what causes his death yet either. Um, but he seemed like a guy that was happy, secure. He had a family. He appeared to be in phenomenal shape. I mean, and he goes, potentially from heart failure, because that's the little bit of information we kind of had, from the government officials in was it Bogota?
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah, and but now, like, I mean, considering Dave Grohl and his relationship was so close, you have to wonder, does that band even does that band continue in the wake of losing someone so beloved and so essential to the band?
That's a great question. I think that's the question everybody's asking right now, and I don't think Dave Grohl even is prepared to answer that right now. I think
No.
Dave is
Mhm.
going through. I mean, everything I knew about Grohl and Hawkins, where they were very close. For Hawkins to be the drummer in a band led by Dave Grohl, that's a huge job. It's got to be
Yeah.
incredibly intimidating. And he figured out a way to do it. I mean, he was able to overcome his own doubts, which he said he had, about that, and turn into a dynamic drummer and a real stage presence. I mean, really, Taylor is probably the best known member of Foo Fighters outside of Dave.
Right.
And a lot of that has to do just with his not only his stage presence, which was pretty magnetic. I mean, he would come out from behind that kit and perform like a Queen song in the middle of a show, right?
Yeah.
But also off stage, he just seemed to be one of those guys who was just everybody who encountered him had good things to say about him. He just seemed to be a genuinely real person, no rock star airs. It was more about just being had enthusiasm for life and his job and playing drums in Foo Fighters that was some, instantly ingratiating, with no power trip going on. So, yeah, I mean, another one that just came out of the blue, like, what the hell, really, really shocking stuff. And, I don't know if the Foo Fighters will continue. Who could tell? It may be just one of those things that the band really can't continue. I give total credit to bands who, when a key member is gone, that you call it a day. It's like, okay, we're really not that band anymore without this guy.
Yeah.
And I would have said that about Led Zeppelin, who, to their credit, never really continued on beyond, when John Bonham died. They did have that one reunion show, but that was pretty much it. They didn't go out as Led Zeppelin ever again. Um, the Who, unfortunately, tried to soldier on without Keith Moon, and everybody will tell you in the band that it was a big mistake. Ronnie Lane was a great guy, but he was not the right guy for that band. And I think they lost some cred when that happened.
Yeah.
They've obviously recovered a little bit with Zach Starkey kind of being more in the Keith Moon mold, but it's never been the same for me since Keith died. You could go on and on. I mean, the Stones without Charlie Watts. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's one
it's not
that's
the
bummed
same.
me out. Yeah, it's kind of bummed me out because I mean Keith was up and down for years saying that once Charlie goes, that's it. And I don't know what. I mean, people change. Hey, you can give you give people the credit to be able to change. The Rolling Stones are this mammoth thing, but I personally think that honestly, for me, Charlie means more to the band, oddly enough, than Mick, which is a very strange thing, I'm sure, for most people to consider. But he was, for me, the heart of the band, in all essence. I mean, Keith and Mick are both highly essential too, but there was something about Charlie that I think without him, and Steve Jordan is a fantastic drummer. Don't get me wrong. Probably the only person I could imagine filling that role, is Steve Jordan. But it's just kind of a bummer that they did decide to keep going and that they're even considering making new music.
Yeah, again, I loved, one of the main reasons I would see the Stones, in their, kind of decline, late career decline, which is going on 30 years now, is that Charlie Watts was in the band. And it was great to see the interplay between him and Keith. And I just think him leaving is just such an essential ingredient to what they were, that it really isn't the Stones anymore. I really do. And even Keith said that himself. He said, when Charlie's gone, we're done. And well, that's clearly not the case. Money talks, and I'm not sure these guys know what to do if they're not the Stones.
That could
I
very
really
well be it.
don't.
It could be like, Keith could be like, I stopped alcohol, I stopped drugs, I stopped smoking. I can't stop playing with the Stones. And, because if I stop playing with Stones, then, except for cockroaches and Keith Richards, Keith Richards will actually not survive everything else, and that
Yeah,
could be
and I
it.
don't think neither he nor Jagger want to tour as a solo act, and play in some Fleabag club versus a stadium with the luxury accompany accommodations and the multi-million-dollar paydays.
Right.
They don't want to live that lifestyle anymore. So it's kind of this or bust. But to my mind, it's like, how much money do you really need, right? And at the same time, calling yourself the Rolling Stones, I mean, it's kind of a lie at this point. It's just like the Who is not the Who. Led Zeppelin wouldn't have been Led Zeppelin. Would REM? Was REM really REM without Bill Berry, who was not only a great drummer but
Yeah.
a key songwriter and backing vocalist? It's just like, it's all these things that you kind of think about. Uh, you lose a key member and you carry on nonetheless under that brand name, and the brand speaks louder than what is actually happening musically. And it's like that to me is just it's not why you started the band, right?
Well, I think that's a good place to stop. Greg, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Again, the Coda Collection is available online as a streaming service, and again, Amazon Prime members can get the Coda Collection for $4.99 a month with a free 7-day trial. The the Coda. Where did I have this? I had this sitting. The Coda Companion is the mobile app that launches today. Oddly enough.
Well, yeah, that's the second screen experience. So you're basically like when you're watching a film, you're getting this additional content, which I helped create actually, along with Bob Gendron, that creates sort of like a companion piece to the movie. So it contextualizes what you're seeing on the screen. Oh, this is the song they're performing. This was last performed in concert, and blah blah blah. You know, here's the guitar that James Hetfield is playing on this particular song. Those kind of little supplemental details that sort of serve as a contextual device for the movie you're watching. So I think it's kind of a cool innovation, and hopefully people like it. You know, the response we've gotten so far on has been really great. So we're going to continue to do this for other films as well.
Excellent. Well, again, we've been talking with Greg Kot, editorial director for the Coda Collection. He's also a co-host of Sound Opinions, and I forgot, what was the basketball coach?
It's called Over the Edge.
Over the Edge.
My Other Life, otehoops.com. It's
Okay.
in Chicago. So if you got a kid plays basketball, come and see us.
All right. Well, Greg, thank you very much again. I wish you the best of luck. Say hi to Jim for me, and just take care.
Thanks, Brett. Good seeing you again.
Good seeing you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.